Hi everyone, so in my last video about autism, I was talking about imagination, active or not active, as a trait or characteristic of people with autism, because there's a large misconception that everybody with autism has a brilliant imagination, they're super highly creative, like major geniuses in fields like art and all that, which isn't true, because again, autism varies from person to person, and some people will have an active imagination like anybody else, and others not so active. And in fact, it's quite common for people with autism to struggle with things like imagination, active imagination, when they're children, because of the way their brain processes information and sensory details. So, although that could very well improve over time based on other factors. Again, if you want to check that out, you got to look at that video, because this video is going to be all about the autistic trait or characteristic of basically facial expressions, or rather struggling with facial expressions. And I don't just mean recognizing them, but also conveying them yourself if you're autistic. Right. Okay, so before I get into it, obviously, my usual mention, if you like the content, you want to see more by the end of this video, follow, leave a like, comment, questions in the comments, requests as well, subscribe to the YouTube channel, and repost the video. Thank you very much. Now, let's just go into it. So, yes, it's well known that people with autism struggle with facial cues or facial expressions, and essentially non-verbal cues or subtle, nuanced changes in expression. For instance, if you're autistic, you might have noticed that perhaps you struggle with eye contact. Now, things like that come down to the difficulties with communication that are part of having autism, and also then difficulties understanding emotions, not just your own, but the emotions of other people and their thought processes. Because again, if you're neurodivergent, all that means is your brain functions differently, and it can make life quite difficult from time to time, depending on where your symptoms lie, or how severe they are, or how often they come into play into your daily life. So, in this case, yes, people with autism, it all has to do, when it comes to facial expressions, the struggle that their brain has with processing the visual information, okay? Now, as I've gotten older, thanks to a combination of drama, kind of trying to analyze myself for a very long time, and also the people around me, basically a lot of it just natural curiosity on my part, I've spent a long time trying to get to grips with different kinds of expressions and different kinds of people. Now, that might sound strange to someone who's not neurotypical, because they're thinking, why can't you just, know what they feel? Because it's like a reflex, how it's like how you can't explain how you move your arm, or why you move your arm when it just does it on its own. Like right now, I do hand gestures, I'm not thinking about it, it's subconscious. Same when you're looking at another person and they give you certain facial expressions, even subtle ones, you can basically get the idea of how they're feeling, or what the intention is behind what they're saying, or what they're thinking. But unless of course they're hiding it. But anyway, if you're autistic though, that isn't so clear. In my case, like I said, I've had to practically analyze what these facial expressions mean my entire life. So now these days I can look and go, oh, okay, I get it. I can see that your brow is furrowed. I can see that you're frowning a little bit, and your eyes look a bit they're not so wide or bright, something like that. And then I can look at it and go, right, you're upset or you're angry. Yeah. Now, if you're autistic, you can't just make that assumption. The reason for this is lots of autistic people tend to focus, when they're looking at someone, on an individual feature instead of the whole face. So as you know, expressions take up the whole face, It's not just what your mouth is doing, it's what your eyes are doing, your eyebrows, what your cheeks might be doing, anything, yeah? And the whole thing tells another person what you're feeling, what you're thinking. But if you focus on just one feature, like someone with autism would in this case, say the mouth, then if the person's frowning, but they're frowning because they're being sarcastic, or they're making a funny joke, or they're pretending to be upset. Now that's usually very obvious, not just in how they look, but how they sound. But if someone with autism is just focusing on the mouth and it's frowning, they might not realize that's a joke and actually make the assumption, oh, you're upset with me, aren't you? What have I done? And then start to feel bad. That's happened to me plenty of times. Now, Or they might focus on just the eyes and see what they tell them. But that's the issue, because when it comes to struggling with facial expressions, people with autism are just focusing on those individual details, not the whole thing. So their brain can't process all the information going on at once. And it's especially difficult if there's a very subtle change in expression or a very subtle movement in your face, like, say, a raised eyebrow or a slight frown. Those things can make it even more difficult, and the reason why this is a problem or challenge from in day-to-day life for someone with autism is because those misunderstanding someone's expression, because it's a big form of communication for every living creature on the planet, like physical expression, not being able to understand it or clock exactly what's happening means that a lot of the time it leads to misconceptions, misunderstandings, and inappropriate responses to what someone with autism thinks that person is feeling or saying. So me, like I said, I've had times when someone's played like a joke or been messing around with me, but because I've accidentally read their expression as genuinely upset or angry at me, I've gotten then defensive, and I've been like, wait, why are you like that? And an argument has sparked. See? And that's not appropriate. In some cases, say if someone's really, really upset, someone with autism might not clock that they're really, really upset and completely overlook it, making that person feel isolated, unheard, and perhaps angry. So that's why lots of times people with autism, especially in the media, are actually presented as being quite deadpan, because it's not just reading others' expressions, it's even formulating their own expressions. They don't know how to convey what they're thinking or they're feeling. They're not focusing on the expressions. Inside it's might be clear, but outside it isn't. Get it? So I keep thinking of like Sheldon, like young Sheldon and stuff, like the way he processes information or he reacts to his friends and stuff, and he always looks quite serious and deadpan. Yeah, it's funny because I once heard someone in a soap opera describe having autism like being a robot on the inside. It's all steel, it's all grey, it's all flat, it's no expression, but the wires inside are still working perfectly fine. They're still running around, they're still crossing over each other, and they're all a jumble of colours, It's strange because outside you look one way, but inside is different, and that's the same for everyone. But if you have autism, it's hard not only to recognize that in other people, but for other people to recognize that in you. In my case, most of the time, I'm gone in the habit of consciously thinking about how I'm expressing myself. Usually, again, based on my drama lessons, because again, that's all about dissecting character. What kind of person are they? Why would they react to a sentence this way? What's their intention for saying this word? And luckily, that has helped me a lot. So now these days, it's almost like I don't have to think about it, but I also know I am actively thinking about how I'm expressing myself. So if I want people to know I'm really happy, I will exaggerate my movements. If I want people to know that I'm sad, I will purposely dull my movements down to show them. Even if my energy levels from ADHD is still spiking and I could easily be super hyperactive while being very sad inside. See, it's really complicated. Anyway, I think that's the gist of it, talking about facial expressions, struggling with facial expressions on both ends if you have autism. And if you like the video, please, like I said earlier, follow, leave a like, comment, requests, subscribe to the YouTube channel, questions as well in the comments, repost the video, and I will see you next time. Till then, have a lovely day. Bye.